Hello. See that initial. All right. So yeah. So welcome in everybody. On Science Streams tonight, our Connected Conversations, we have Chris Jones, who has graciously given us some time to talk about some really awesome topics. I'm excited because I got some good questions, and please put in your questions as well. Hey, Encelatosaurus, thanks for stopping into the chat already. Good to see you. She's going to be a future guest on Science Streams as well, so everyone say hello. And that's just in a couple of weeks, so looking forward to that as well. And so you have so many interests. I was looking through like all these stuff that you were posting and everything. I was kind of like, how are you going to fit all this science into one stream? But hey, Volcano Doc, welcome in. Thanks for being here. Awesome to see you in here in the chat participating. My first question here. School in Oklahoma, correct?
Yep.
Oceanography. Were you just like landlocked and you're like, forget this, I'm going to study the ocean? I mean, how does that happen?
So for my undergrad, I grew up in Oklahoma, and so going to OSU was sort of just in a way natural. I also really loved the feel, and they have a pretty well established geology program, and it was just sort of sheer luck that, like, I guess in 2014 they wanted to diversify, so they brought in a marine geologist. Her name is Dr. Natasha Riedinger, and I found her on the website and reached out, and I was like, hey, I'm interested in these topics. And so that was really the way that I got into it. It was just sort of luck that the department had brought in a marine geologist and oceanographer to work there. And then I was lucky enough that I did well enough in her lab that she trusted to bring me actually on some expeditions. So
okay, because one of the things I like to get at is kind of some people's backstories of how they get into science. So let's go even further back. All right, let's go to where that initial scientific thinking started, you know, where you're kind of like, you know what, I think I kind of like this science stuff. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, so I'm really fortunate that I've loved geology almost my whole life. My grandparents on my mom's side lived out in the middle of the forest in eastern Oklahoma, and there's some really, really incredible Pennsylvanian cliffs out there. And so there's just like awesome geology, and they live on the shore of a lake. And so we just like go out and collect rocks, and there's an ammonite that we collected when I was little. It's like about this big. It's one of those spirally fossils.
That is cool.
And it just like it sat around their house my whole life. And there were rocks and cliffs, and I would just explore all the time. And so that's what really, I guess, ignited it. And then I was lucky that I had some really good teachers in like middle school and high school that sort of fostered my love of science. And then the sort of weird part is that I never took like an earth science class until I actually got to college. But I realized that I liked all these different forms of science. So like geology is really a combination of biology and chemistry and physics and all the stuff put together. And so I had really good teachers in each one of those that helped me realize, okay, I want to put all of this together and study the earth.
Awesome. Hey, Kristen, thanks for stopping in tonight. One of my Twitter pals from the SciTLab chat I was in earlier. And Moran will recognize you as well. Thanks for stopping in. And if you have any questions, of course, just give a shout out as we're going through this and put it in chat. Now, do you have the chat up, Chris, right now? So you can see if people ask.
I can pull it up.
You can do that. Geochemist. I guess that's not hiding what it is that you're interested in. The person in the chat whose name is actually Geochemist. Wow, this Dr. Natasha person sounds real cool. Yeah. Uh-oh, your audio's not working. So we were having a little trouble with OBS earlier, Ninja, with some of this audio garbage. But sounds pretty cool. So let me give a chat to him. I know he's trying to get on here. And so people like seeing each other in chat. I love that. And few other questions that we're gonna have about this. All right, he's gonna refresh, so he's gonna disappear and then come back. What I really want to get into is the talking. Hey, there you go.
Okay, you can hear me now? Okay.
Yep, we can hear you.
Cool.
Awesome. See, that fixed really easy. That was good. I like that. And so I think I want to get to kind of there are a couple main topics I really want to ask you about. And you mentioned these, so there's your interest in like the origins of life, right? Which is really cool. Your interest in like expeditions, which is really awesome as well. And then this marine geology idea. I've been playing a lot of Subnautica, in case you didn't know, where you go around underwater collecting different minerals and whatnot to build with. So that's all I could think of in like the last few weeks. You know, we'll just start talking about that. So this idea of marine geology, and I got some other games that this applies to as well. Since we are on Twitch, we can talk a little bit about video games. What is it that you've done in that? What is your interest in marine geology? What should we know?
So my personal interest is really about like the sediments. So that would be where you're getting these rocks and minerals and various resources, but more so about like how metals are cycled in the sediment. I don't want to get like too in depth or like jargony, but
yeah, please don't.
Yeah. But it's like a really, I mean, global process and controls metal availability and throughout time overall. And it's mainly driven by like microorganisms in the sediment. So really looking at like the interaction of life and geology and rocks is my personal interest in marine geology. But I'm actually also really interested in how things like the topography of the seafloor can affect things like ocean circulation and ocean currents. And so if you formed a new island, or a really good example is when like North and South America joined, and you had the Panama Isthmus. Being like when it formed, it cut off this pathway. And so how does that affect global climate and fish populations and separating species and all this stuff? It has real huge consequences for the world. So that's my personal interest in marine geology.
So I'm trying to understand this on a real basic level. So you have these minerals in the bottom of the seafloor, and you got the microbes. And microbes, of course, require some of these minerals for metabolism, for life. And that's where that cycling comes from.
In some ways, yeah. In other ways, it's like the really basic way, I guess, to explain it is, there's oxygen. Like we breathe oxygen, right? That's what we respire. In marine sediments, at the very surface, a lot of the times there's a little bit of oxygen still left, but then the microbes there use that oxygen up. And so the next set of microbes has to use a different thing. They have to respire something else. And so that can turn into things like like iron reduction and nitrogen reduction and things like that. And so it sort of changes the redox conditions. So things like that used to be stable that are in like an oxidized state become unstable. So then that can form new minerals. Like pyrite formation is a huge thing. And then of course pyrite can be an iron ore, an iron source, or a sulfur source. So those are like, it's really often about like, sometimes they can use the actual mineral, or they're sort of changing the environment around them in the sediment that then makes it to where new minerals form or dissociate.
Interesting. So there's a question in chat too. So you could almost tell what microbes are living in a certain place by the mineral content, or you could predict the mineral content based on the microbes that are living there. So it's kind of like a...
Yeah.
Okay. All right, that's kind of cool.
It's of course you can't like tell the exact species or anything, but you can tell like there's a region where things like sulfate reducers or sulfur reducers will live, and you can tell that based on sort of the mineralogy and the sedimentology there. It's really interesting.
Okay. So can you see the chat now, or can you see Volcano
The last
Doc's
time I tried
question?
to see it in mine.
Okay, it went crazy. Okay, never mind then. I'll read it to you. So what would the ocean circulation have been like before the Panama Isthmus closed? Like, if it was a bit of ocean water, how would I have moved about the globe then versus now? You see, you tried to do something and then the audio went again. Look at that. That's amazing. I think we're diagnosing this problem. Whenever you try to use Twitch, your audio goes. At least we know how to fix it. That's the amazing thing. The geology gremlins. Isn't that weird though? I don't know why that would happen like that. That is bizarro. But I always find it interesting that, you know, when you're able to make predictions in science, that's the whole point. So when you have that ocean floor, and depending on the microbes or depending on the geology, you know, you can predict one or the other. That's cool.
Again? Okay.
There you go. Stop doing things.
Okay.
We'll just talk. Stop touching the computer. We're done with that.
Sounds good.
The geology ones.
So the question, it was about the Panama Isthmus, right?
Yep. How that would change, you know, the circulation.
Yeah. So I think, let's see, it's echoing on my end.
Don't touch anything.
So it probably would have affected Atlantic circulation most. It would have allowed like the overall driver of ocean circulation is the formation of cold water masses, poles, and so a major one called the North Atlantic deep water, and right now it goes basically straight down the Atlantic, but before it closed, it could have branched off the Pacific, and that would have changed the overall global ocean circulation pathway. So,
okay, cool. So, do you have any experience? Like, one of the big things right now for like minerals in the ocean, of course, the mining of the ocean, right? That everyone is saying is, you know, 5 years away, right? This mining of, you know, whatever different minerals and metals that might be down there. Do you have any experience with that, having gone on like your expeditions or anything? Because I know that's a big topic.
I haven't actually done it myself, but I applied to go on and that was going to be evaluating the environmental impact of mining in the Pacific. And so at least we know that they are looking and working on that before they go out and actually study them. The main sources, minerals that I know about, like resources, are things called manganese and iron nodules on the floor, and they form basically in the open ocean, where you have toxic conditions down to the seafloor, and it's just iron and manganese coming up out of the sediment, interacting with oxygen in the water, and they precipitate, and so you get these like nodules sitting on the seafloor, and they're important, and they can be like mineral resources because there are other that sort of stick to these, they absorb, and so things like lithium could be incorporated in there, and that's one of the reasons people want to study them and collect them.
Okay. Hey, structural geologists. Wow, look at all the geologists in chat. I mean, it's I wonder how that happened.
I might have pulled Lauren.
Yeah.
And then she might have pulled everyone else.
Oh, there's Lauren right there. I was like, I was wondering when she was going to show up in chat. Awesome. Look at that. All the love there. I will add that the different topic, the audio is a little bit choppy still. So, and that's you. I think.
Yeah.
It was fine, and then it was bad, and then it was fine again. So I don't know. It might improve. So since we're talking about the expeditions now, this is something of a lot of interest to a lot of people. This is one of the things I tell my students. I'm like, if you want to travel, you want adventure, science. Right? I mean, hands down, it's like you're going to have some adventures. You're going to go places. It's an option, unless you're just going to sit in a lab. That's an option too. But there are so many opportunities in science for these kinds of experiences. I know I've had some of my own. So talk a little bit about your experience. What kind of got you into these expeditions? Which ones have you been on? Tell us a story, maybe.
Yeah. So let's see. On two on the ocean, and what got me into this was working with Dr. Bieninger at OSU, and it was really sort of out of necessity. I mean, the project that I wanted to work on was based on marine sediments, and she was lucky enough to be accepted to go on one, to have a spot for a student, and so she brought me along. Of course, I worked in her lab already, and I proposed a project and got a little bit of funding for it. So then we went out, and the first one that I went on was out of Argentina. So we flew into Buenos Aires, we got on the ship, and we went out for 5 weeks, and we were sampling sediments off the shore, or off the coast of Argentina and Uruguay, and it was cool. Like, I mean, it was in the middle of the winter here in the US. So I was there with like a nice like 75-degree temperature. It was really, really cool. Trying to think of a fun story. So while we were actually on the ship, we had like, you know, some, not like parties, but we had like group hangouts. So I got to meet all students from Europe. It was a Europe ship, and got to meet all of them. When we got back, there was a reception on board. I got to meet like ambassadors and stuff. They all came on board, and they were like socializing, talking about the science we'd done. I just saw that my video is copy. Could I pop out and come back in?
Yeah, I'll tell a story now too while you're doing that. So, you know, one of my expedition stories, because I sailed on the replica ship Half Moon for years as an educator, and there was one time, and we would travel, half the student crew, 6 would be from my school, and 6 would be from a school in the Netherlands, from Heerenveen. And we're on the square rig vessel, and we're in the middle of Haverstraw Bay on the Hudson River, and you can look out. So we're in Haverstraw, right in the middle of this big area in the Hudson River, and we could look out and see a thunderstorm coming. And it was scary as heck. And so basically we all huddled around the mast at the bottom of the ship. And if you haven't been in a ship in a thunderstorm, where there's like gale force winds pushing on it, and you see the anchor road look like it's about to snap. All right, there's no scare like that kind of scare. Right, kids were all but like hugging each other. So that was a scary as heck experience. I'm alive to tell it. But you know, I can't imagine being, you know, on a ship in like 1609 and having that kind of storm, and there's no Coast Guard. You know, if something goes bad. Yeah, that was scary as heck. But anyways, that's one of my expedition stories. But all right, you got to talk so we can diagnose your audio. Yep. All right, I gotta get rid of the echo. It sounds better though.
Sounds good.
Yep, sounds better.
That's actually a good segue into the second expedition I went on, which was so that one went out of, the first one was like offshore, basically directly east of Argentina, like where Buenos Aires would be. The second one was down towards the South Sandwich Islands, it's a volcanic island chain in the South Atlantic, sort of near the Weddell Sea. So they're sub-Antarctic islands, just north of the Antarctic Circle, although the last one is sort of right on the Antarctic Circle. And we were there like right before like they were going into winter, which is when these large storms come off the continent, off like the Antarctic continent. And I guess it was the last like day we were working, because there was like a 4-day transit back to the Falkland Islands, which is where we like got off the ship and flew back to wherever we came from. There was a hurricane force storm that came off, and we had to like buckle everything down on the ship, and we were told to just stay in our rooms, and like there are these like the crew handed out these wooden boards to put up next to our beds so we wouldn't like fly out when we were like sleeping. And I just remember like thinking,
or it's a coffin, what are the other?
Literally, like, because so like, you know, the most dangerous passage is the Drake Passage, right? The one, the narrow opening between South America and Antarctica. And we weren't in the Drake Passage, but like we were still down there, which is where you have these huge, you know, storms and waves, and we were having like 35-foot waves, and so the ship is just up and down, rolling back and forth.
I'm getting like a whole sick just thinking about it.
So that was the worst storm we had. We had a couple other days where it was interesting. One of the funniest moments, I guess, was I was the only person, of course, that like was born and raised in Oklahoma. Dr. Riedinger has lived here for a while, but Oklahoma is of course known for tornadoes. And there was a day that there was a storm, and we were luckily near one of the islands. It's called Zavodovsky Island, and it has the world's largest colony of chinstrap penguins, if anybody likes penguins. I think it has like something like 1 million penguins living on it. It's crazy.
Wow.
And we were so we sort of like sheltered behind it during this storm, like so the winds would break off the island. And there was a tornado that formed on the island. Then it like came like off and towards the ship, and the bridge was open. So there were some of us just like hanging out up on the bridge, talking to the crew. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's a tornado. And people are like freaking out, and they're like, what do we do? And I'm like, you watch it go. Like nothing's not gonna hurt you. Like, so that was maybe the funniest moment, because they were like, how are you so relaxed about this? And I was like, I just grew up with it, I guess. I don't know.
That is interesting. That's the type of thing that would freak me out, I guess. But for you, it's just kind of like, that's an F1. Whatever.
Yeah.
I walked to school in that. That won't even pick up a cow. That is funny.
Yeah. The second expedition, I guess the like science that we were doing is it's a volcanic island chain, but there's a hydrothermal vent system, because there's a spreading ridge, which is where like new ocean floor is being produced just to the west of it. And we were studying the hydrothermal vents there, and there were people like my team that I was on was looking at the metals that are being sourced from the vents, of course, and sediment. While the other teams, there were teams working on crabs, and there were teams doing filming for various projects and things like that. So it was really cool to be surrounded by a lot of people doing very different work on it.
That's cool. Kristen, thanks for the follow. You hadn't followed me yet. That's just crazy. You've only been like coming to the streams for like months and months. That's cool. Yeah, that's interesting when you have all those different fields of study in the same place examining a different kind of piece of the same place. You mentioned before about that, experience being with other, nationalities as well, and branching out that way. And sometimes we've talked about it before. Sometimes being with other branches of science is almost like another foreign country, because you could try talking to each other and not understand a thing you're saying to each other.
Yep.
And so, how many expeditions have you been on now?
Just those two.
Okay.
The first one was 5 weeks, and the second one was almost 8. And so you just get on the ship and go off and come back 2 months later.
Did someone like try to sell you on it? Kind of like, oh, the ship is so big, you won't even feel the ocean. And you're like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, I'll get on the ship. Yeah.
Yeah. Dr. Riedinger was, I was a little hesitant at first because I had no idea if I would get seasick. And, if you sign up for this, there's no going back. You were on the ship and that's it. If you're sick, you're sick. But she, of course, said it's a once in a lifetime opportunity. I mean, the South Sandwich Islands, I think I saw a statistic that less people go there per year than go to space. And so it's really incredible to get to be one of those people that gets to be on this team. And so it didn't take too much selling. I was as soon as she was like, you're going to get to do this cool science, you get to meet these people from all over the world. And I'm still like working with some of them on projects. And so it's nice to have, these connections. And then of course it's really cool to get to do that science right then and there. I was lucky that I got to do that all in undergrad. Now I'm in grad school in California, but in undergrad it was, it's not unheard of, but it's less common to get to do that actual like real in the field science instead of just taking classes. And so.
I will also add, since Kristen's here, and I think there might be some other like high school or middle school level teachers, there's I think it's the Summer at Sea program. It's done through NOAA, where if you're a teacher, you can go on a research vessel for, I think it's like 5 or 6 weeks or something. It's a crazy amount of time, but as you know, once you get out there, you're out there. And you're not coming back until you get the research done. So there are opportunities for, not just undergraduate but for, professionals, as, teachers to have these kinds of science experiments as well. I have thought about it. However, that's a huge chunk of time for someone with a family, and, and summers are sacred. But
these were not during the summer. They were both during the semester. And so I had to arrange, how to do that. Definitely difficult.
But it depends on the hemisphere that you're on, the northern or southern hemisphere, if it's summer or winter, though. So
I guess both of them, I was there. The first one was, I was gone all of January and 1 week of February. And so it was summer in South America. And then the second one, it was like the last 3 weeks of April, all of May, and the first week of June. So I was there sort of in the transition from their summer to their winter, which is why the storms got worse the whole time.
So would you recommend it to like other researchers as a course of? Okay. All right. It comes highly recommended.
Without a doubt.
All right. I'll mention it to my students.
If you ever have the opportunity. 100%.
I might. I don't know. I do get motion sick, and it gets worse as I've been getting older. I remember the one time I was
I did
sailing.
get a little bit.
On the river, it's nice. It's just nice and flat.
The trick I came up with was I committed to taking 2 Dramamine pills a day. Just right off the bat, like regardless, they make non-drowsy ones now, which
it doesn't
worked.
matter.
Yeah, but I started taking them, I guess, like the 2 days before, like we had to get there to the ship first and load things and sign all this paperwork and stuff. So I started taking it while I was even still on land, and then took them every day with lunch and or I guess it was breakfast and lunch, until I got back off the ship. And then even after I got off the ship, I still took them, because land sickness is a thing, because now you're used to moving all the time, and then when the world is stationary, you're like, okay, your legs don't know what to do. So that works for me. I know some people have, like Dr. Riedinger, she gets really, really motion sick, and so she takes like prescription level thing.
Yep. And do you want to watch the chat go crazy? There are special crystals that you can get and wear around your neck, and it'll prevent the motion sickness. Did you know that?
Yes. Yeah. You can get them at the rock shops on Route 66.
Yeah. Let's see. Do you miss the potatoes? The geochemist says.
Do I miss the potatoes? I wonder who's asking this. If it's Hannah, because I think Hannah, one of my friends, tuned in. No, I do not miss the potatoes.
And how about the beer?
That I do miss the beer. That was German ships. If you are going to go on a ship, go on a German one or a French one, because or a Russian one, I guess. They're not dry. They have very nice parties. American ships are dry, from what I know. I haven't been on one yet. But the potatoes, so this was much more of a problem on the second expedition, because we were gone straight, like for 7.5 weeks, like didn't see anybody else. The first trip I went on, we had like one port call in the middle to like pick up some equipment, so we went into Montevideo and picked up some equipment, and then like went back out, so they like refreshed our fresh fruit and things. The second one, we ran out of like fresh food the last like week and a half, and so we were eating like canned potatoes and canned peas and carrots for like every meal except for breakfast. And so I had like these, I don't know what the word in German is, but it's basically just like boiled potatoes with parsley sprinkled on top for lunch every day for a week. And I don't think I'll ever eat them again, because I don't want to.
That is funny. That is funny. So let's get to like what you're doing right now. What are the plans for like this spring and coming into this summer? So your PhD, what are you planning on?
So right now I'm still sort of in I guess like the planning phase. So at UC Riverside, our first like year and a half is focused on writing like our proposals for our projects, and like certain like getting our feet wet basically in the lab and like doing some preliminary work. So it's mainly just a lot of that. I have 2 projects that I'm sort of working on. The first one is looking at like so the geologic timescale in really basic sense is divided into these like major periods and eras and eons. And I'm working on some rocks that are like 2.5 billion years old, that are recording some like of the rise of oxygen in the atmosphere. And so the Earth was not always oxygenated. That was an event that happened, but we don't really know exactly like why it took so long. The Earth is 4.6 billion years old, so why did it take 2 billion years for oxygen to suddenly rise in the atmosphere? So I'm working on a problem relating to that, and I'm also working on sort of like not totally different project, but one working on carbonate rocks, so like things like limestones and dolomites and things, and sort of just looking at how we can study them reliably, they're really they're easy to change after you've deposited them. So you can, once you've deposited like a calcite or something, it can get dissolved, it can get reprecipitated, all these processes can affect it. And when we're studying these old rocks, we want to know that what we're looking at is the original signal from when it formed, not some signal that happened when water flowed through the rock system a billion years later, right? And so I'm sort of doing this like synthesis project of how do we approach carbonate rocks and make sure that we're seeing the right signals and that what we're seeing is valid. And so then when we write papers based off of them, there can be a whole span of papers that are based on carbonate rocks, that we're making sure we're seeing a real original signal. I don't know if that made sense, but
it makes sense. But the question is, how is that like kind of like radioisotopes? Do you determine that age? I mean, is that part of it? Just composition in general? I mean, I don't even. So, and Geochemist asks, what proxies are you using? And Kristen, you're not lame. You're awesome. Okay. So what proxies are you using?
Okay, I'll try to answer all of that. So yeah, age for these rocks, I won't actually be doing the dating because it's already been done for most of these. But you normally use radioisotopes or radioactive isotopes. Common ones for like really old rocks like that are like uranium lead dating and potassium argon dating. And then so the proxies that I'm using are I'm like I guess the general phrase would be a trace metal geochemist. So trace metals are metals like uranium or molybdenum, or rhenium and osmium, things that are not super common but are in concentrations high enough to where we can actually measure them in rocks. And so I'll look at first their concentrations and then second their isotopes. So for the oxygen related project, I'll be looking at like molybdenum isotopes and thallium isotopes and vanadium isotopes, which are proxies that can measure redox states, both local and global scale. And then for the carbonate one, it's going to be much more about like calcium isotopes and carbon isotopes, maybe some magnesium stuff, but not sure about that yet.
Okay, and Lauren's busting out the geology puns, of course. Feel free to chime in, chat, and keep spreading it. I should have my wife's been doing this thing with a coworker of hers. She teaches 6th grade earth science, and they have a board where every day they write another geology or earth science pun, and it's like gone on 2 sides of this whiteboard. So that's kind of yeah.
I will admit, Lauren is the queen of puns.
So, so do you have an expectant date to kind of like where you have to have your your proposal done by for your PhD? I don't want to like get you too far ahead and have you stress out right now, but you know.
No, no worries. So technically, we have to submit the requirements are we have to take 4 classes and write 2 proposals. They're 2 full-length NSF style, so they're 15 pages, or single-spaced and everything. We have to submit them by our 7th quarter. So UCR works on a quarter system instead of semesters. But for those 7 quarters, summers don't count. So it's basically the winter of our 3rd year. We have to have submitted our proposals, had them approved, and then also qualified. We have like an oral qualification defense, sort of like an exam with our committee. But for the proposals, there's like all these requirements about like how soon you have to submit drafts, basically, and you're supposed to go through multiple rounds of review, and you're supposed to give like something like 2 months of review time to each of your committee members. And so that's why we normally try to get them done fairly soon, or at least started and have drafts going early, so then we're not crunching at the last second to get edits in and all that. So I have plenty of time since I'm still just in my 1st year.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, and so the puns keep coming, by the way. You can't see it, but yeah.
I'll have to go later and check.
Yeah. I texted my wife and told her she should get into chat so she can do it, because teaching sixth grade, you really got the Jeezy puns going there. So it's almost 10 o'clock, and that means we're going to play a game. And so you are, of course, have been on expeditions, right, famously, and you've been espousing that. And these are about the deep ocean. So I thought a great topic for you to answer questions on would be about expeditions to Mount Everest. All right, one of the highest places. So we will test your knowledge when it comes to the expeditions on Everest. So that's okay, Marcus. You're here. We've also had Volcano Doc was here to mod as well. So 3 questions, and if you get 2 out of these 3 right, I'll do we'll do a sub on here. So I'll hand that out. That'll be awesome. That's good. There's no trolls here right now, so we don't have to worry about kicking anybody. We don't need mods. Everyone's being nice. So, question 1. Mount Everest is known as the highest peak in the world. We should also note that we should have quotes around the highest peak because of what fact? Everest's, or is it A, Everest's original height was recorded with 200 meters of snow and ice on top, making it the second tallest, if you don't include the snow. Is it B, although Mount Everest is the highest mountain in the world, its summit is not the farthest point from the center of the Earth? The farthest point is on Mount Chimborazo in South America. Or is it C, Everest has been shrinking at average 1 meter a year due to loss of water mass that once existed, but has now been lost due to runoff and climate change, which is being exacerbated. So is Mount Everest not the tallest mountain because A, it had snow and ice on top, so it's actually smaller than that? Is because it's actually B. You think it's going to be B? You're sure of this? You are right. Very good. See, I knew the geologist would get this, right? So I found that very interesting, and it kind of makes sense, right? Because it's actually going to be, furthest from the center. So it's not technically the tallest if, that's your measurement.
I think Mauna Loa is also taller if you count like base to summit than Everest, but it's not at all.
That is true as well. All right, question 2. This is a little bit more esoteric and not involving geology, so you have no advantage on this. All right.
Okay.
Which of the following events has actually occurred on the summit? Is it A, a Nepalese couple had their first marriage on the summit in 2005? Was it B, American Jim Whittaker in 1963 famously made a cherry-flavored snow cone and then proceeded to eat it? Or C, Austrian mountaineer Peter Habeler in 1978 cracked open a beer to share with his Nepalese guide?
I'm torn between B and C, because B sounds like a very stereotypical, I'm going to make an ice, snow cone on the summit. But I can also see an Austrian cracking a beer. And I'm going to go with C for this one.
It was actually A. A Nepalese couple had their first marriage on the summit in 2005. So they actually went up to the summit and got married. I don't think they had a lot of guests.
I wonder if they're wearing like traditional wedding attire too, or if they were wearing their suits.
I'm sure the Nepalese they're probably wearing their cultural attire, which keeps them warm, just because I think every piece of Nepalese attire would probably be something that would keep you warm. Lauren says, "Fanclastic answer." Oh God. All right, question 3. You got your 1-1 right now. All right.
Okay.
You can get this right, and you can win. All right. The bottom of Mount Everest at the base has been called the highest garbage dump in the world. In 2019, which of the following was removed as part of a large cleanup effort? Was it A, 4 human bodies, B, 183 pairs of skis dating back as far as 1963, or was it C, 54 cell phones?
I'm gonna go with cell phones on this one. I could see all 3 being real.
Just kind of the point. I try to make them all believable. The right answer is actually 4 human bodies.
See, I didn't expect that at the base. I expected that like on the actual slopes.
No, I guess it was like, they were like cleaning up all the garbage from like that the base camps, which if you include the base camps, remember, are actually like not like at like the base. It's like the base camp is actually pretty far up.
18,000 feet or something.
Yeah. So, because there's like the main town, I guess, and then there's like the base camp. The first base camp is actually up, where they actually like get to and leave from. So, yeah, I guess there are some climbers they found there. So,
wow,
that's unfortunate. Yeah, I learned a lot doing the research for these. Oh, John Oliver did a whole thing about that. Yeah. So, yeah, so interesting story. So I would much rather do an expedition on the ocean than on Everest, I think. I'm more likely to live. I support. Yeah, you support that. I kind of figured you would. So you didn't do bad. That was pretty good. I'm excited to I'm thinking about expeditions myself, but we've been chatting about it. My next expedition will be to the local stream in my near my school. That'll be my next expedition, though. Nothing
sounds like something Lauren could help with. She's working on rivers and.
Yep. Oh, I'll be asking people. I have lots of connections now when it comes to geology. I know more geologists now than I ever had in my entire life. So that is something else. Now, this is Twitch, so we're going to talk video games for a little while. Are you a gamer at all?
Oh. No, I have played Mario Kart and Lego Star Wars, and that is the summation of all the video games I've ever played in my life.
Those are fantastic games, though. I've played more Lego games with my family than I care to admit. I shall admit, a lot. Mm-hmm. Like, we pretty much beat Lego Harry Potter all the years. All right, unlocked almost just about everything. So that's a family favorite. Star Wars was one of my favorites at one point. I played through all those as well. So now there are a few things like Subnautica I mentioned earlier is a good one as far as like the seafloor, because you do have to collect stuff and then build. It's like Minecraft, except underwater predominantly. As you build your habitat underwater as well and go through your sci-fi plot. Another one that I thought about while doing this was there's a game called Beyond Blue, where part of it involves, it's mainly a biology one where it's realistic. You go out and there's a little adventure that involves deep sea mining as like the environmental danger. So I'll plug a couple games for people that are interested in maybe exploring a little bit more of the underwater world for marine geology. And of course, Minecraft's great for geology.
Yeah.
So
I've always wanted to get Minecraft. I need to do that.
Somewhere between your, the research and getting your PhD and all that.
Yeah.
And but now, speaking of what is it that you do for fun, right? Because I will say a lot of my students think that, like, if you're in science, you're just a boring person because all you're doing is playing with rocks and studying rocks or whatever. So what is it that you do that kind of like that keeps you sane?
So let's see. I'm really lucky that I live like right on a small mountain in Riverside, and so I trail run. So running is probably my main like pastime for clearing my head. I've actually run a lot with Lauren. We ran a half marathon together, and so running. I play the piano. My piano is actually just right here behind me, and recently I've been playing a lot more like pop music, I guess, like so in case whenever COVID ends and we can go back to like bars and parties and things, I'll have things to play that people can relate to, instead of just like classical music and random movie soundtracks. I like reading like sort of like science books in a way. Like, I don't know how to describe it. Like, there's like Bill Bryson's short history or brief history of nearly everything. There's one called The Disappearing Spoon, which is about like, it goes through
That's a great book.
Real life, like how you use elements in our daily lives. And The Disappearing Spoon is about how they used to make spoons out of gallium, which melts at room temperature. So like you would put it into your tea and then it would melt and disappear. So I like reading books like that.
That's Sam Keen.
I'm a huge Lord of the Rings. So anything by Tolkien. I love reading and also like watching the shows, and I'm excited for the Amazon show that's going to come out just to see what all they do. Otherwise, I guess just like in general, exploring Southern California is what I've been up to, of course, in like safe ways. So I do it alone, and I don't go to anywhere that's public and crowded. But there's like a lot of national parks down here and beaches and things to go out and hike and see. So that's the main things that I do for fun. Cool.
Now, Sam Keen is a great author. He wrote The Disappearing Spoon. He also wrote what I've read, another book of his called The Bastard Brigade, and it's all about the German plot during World War II to make the atomic bomb, and he goes through the backstory of how the U.S. tried to like stop that production of the bomb and all that. So that's a really good book too.
Okay.
Volcano Doc wants to know, what is your favorite element?
My favorite element is molybdenum, hands down.
You just like to say it?
So I like to say it, yes, but I like its properties, I guess. Like, I like studying it. It's really interesting. And one of so without going into too much detail, so like the nitrogen cycle is really tied to the molybdenum cycle, because molybdenum used to not be like bioavailable. It used to be locked up in rocks because it has to be an oxygenated atmosphere for it to be eroded. And so until there was oxygen, there was this like massive tie-up basically. So then molybdenum, once it was able to be weathered, it could be supplied to the oceans, and then it binds in the nitrogenase enzyme in organisms, and especially like bacteria and probably archaea. I'm not sure on that. So it like had this massive control, but it's only good for organisms at certain levels. So if you get too high, like things like arsenic too, then it becomes toxic. So it's this like sort of like love-hate relationship between molybdenum and life on Earth. And then of course it's cycled, and it can tell you all this stuff about like past environments and everything. So I could talk about molybdenum all day.
Well, it's your favorite element, so that we can tell. That was I never knew that it was somehow connected to the nitrogen cycle. That's interesting. I learned something today. I have to go in and look that up and see how that works in the molybdenum piece of that.
Yep.
That's interesting.
It really just ties into how organisms can utilize nitrogen through enzymatic activity. I think it's like in the protein, it helps the protein form the correct structure. Otherwise, it would not work. So
there you go. The geochemist says end cycle equals best cycle.
That's probably Hannah. She studies the nitrogen cycle. So
okay. Volcano Doc asks, and this is Volcano Doc, by the way. So, which is better, igneous, metamorphic, or sedimentary rocks? Caution: there is a correct answer.
So I should say igneous rocks because that's what volcanoes produce. Although they also produce metamorphic rock based on the magma, and it heats the chamber around it. So there could be two right answers to this question, but I have to stay with my heart and say sedimentary rocks are where it's at. So
Mr. Hamill says punk rock is the best rock. There you go.
I should have gone with that.
That's funny. So how do you like living out there at Riverside? I mean, is that you enjoying it so far? Hopefully, because you're stuck there.
Yep. Yeah, I really like it. I lived in Oklahoma my whole life. I lived in like the same house, the same side of my bedroom. The bed was always in the same spot my entire life until I went to college. So moving out here was really cool. I was lucky that like I have some good roommates. They're also grad students here at UCR, and so we can all like bond over that. And then I appreciate, so Riverside, for those who don't know exactly where it is, it's like an hour to an hour and a half ish east of Los Angeles. Right now it's more like an hour because traffic isn't quite as bad. So like we're away from the crazy traffic and busyness and smog and all the stuff that happens and forms out in Los Angeles, but we're still close enough. Like I've gone to the beach, I've gone down to San Diego, gone to like Joshua Tree and driven up through like the San Bernardino Mountains. Like it snowed here a few weeks ago, and so like I went and saw snow, and like it looked like you're in Colorado, and yet I only drove an hour from Riverside to see that. So I really enjoy that. I also love the department here. So it's very different that like the geology department at Oklahoma State is very like oil focused. It's much more of like a sedimentary petroleum geology focused school, whereas here it's the School of Earth and Planetary Sciences, and so it's much more focused on like astrobiology and exoplanet modeling and like these sort of like very different questions in geology. So I was really excited to get like involved and start working on these other types of things. And it's a totally different world. I mean, like I'm still doing geology, but it's a very different type of geology, and I like it. I also love the food here. There's of course good food in Oklahoma, but you can get any type of food you want in Southern California, and it's all really incredible.
I will say I went to San Diego for a teacher program once, and like the food was like the best fish tacos I've ever had in my life. Like, I mean that is amazing.
Yep.
So, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. That's good stuff. Well, I'm glad you finally got out of, and like got to see like a little bit more of the world. I mean, you went from like being stuck in the same bedroom to like globetrotter, all within like, a few years, it sounds like, and now you're in California. So that is sweet. Now, be careful running out there. I heard they got some mountain lions, and they tend to like attack those runners sometimes.
I've heard so. Luckily, one of my roommates is like volunteers for the like county mountain rescue team, and so I have an in with that. So
Oh, there you go. You got the in. So if you're getting mauled, you can just get on the phone. Hey, hurry up! I lost a leg. Come get me.
Luckily, I have not seen any mountain lions yet. I think that they're probably on. They might be on the other side, like this right here. The university sort of like rolls up onto the mountain a little bit. So there's normally a little bit more like traffic and people. So they don't venture here. Although I have heard that there was once a bobcat on campus, just sort of walking around. So
cool.
Could see one someday.
That's nothing for you though, coming from Oklahoma. You got plenty of wildlife out there, like that.
Yeah, I do miss that. My parents' house backs up to like a green belt and then a farm, and so they're like the farm has horses, and the horses would jump the fence into our backyard and run around just casually. And so I miss sort of having the little bit of like rural aspect, and I miss seeing the stars. There's a lot more light pollution out here, so I can't see the stars as well.
Yeah, that is a downside, I will say. Stars are nice. So, and I'll plug upstate New York. Up the north of the Adirondack Mountains is one of the dark skies places in New York, or in the country. So, yeah, but Tupper Lake. So if you want to go to dark skies and see a really dark sky, upstate New York, way up there,
someday
in Tupper Lake. They have some of the good in the Southwest as well. You could probably drive, further out into like the desert area, and you could get some nice stars there too. So, but the other thing, I'll ask you this now: the expedition. Did you ever like go on the expedition in the middle of the ocean and like turn off the lights?
Oh yeah. I took.
I want to do that.
Some long exposure photography, and it was really interesting because it was in the southern hemisphere, so there's different constellations that we don't see. But yeah, it was incredible. Like, I remember one of the days I went up, and like there's like an observation deck on the very top. There's another deck even higher. That's where like the radio everything is. But like the one just below that is where like you could go up and just like sort of sit around and do whatever you want. And I went up there at like 1 a.m. one night, and because like we have like shifts, so like I just finished my shift and I was gonna go get some fresh air, and it was like a perfectly still night. It was it was like a half moon, so it wasn't like super bright, and it was like one of those picturesque, like it's reflecting in the water perfectly, like, and then I saw like some dolphins jumping. It was incredible. Like the stars are all everywhere, and there's absolutely no light pollution because you're hundreds of miles away from the continent, and the only lights are like the ones that are on the bridge, really, but they turn those off at night so they can actually see. Otherwise they wouldn't be able to see. So it was incredible.
That's great. So one of the last questions for tonight, so we can get going. Volcano Doc wants to know, what advice would you give a student who wants to get into marine geology?
So I guess my first advice is don't necessarily limit like yourself to your school. I mean, like how we started off. I mean, I got into marine geology in Oklahoma, which is a landlocked state, right? So you wouldn't really think about it. The second one would be probably there's a lot of like you mentioned like STEM Cs, right? That's the IODP one. So there's basically just a lot of like outreach programs and like high school and undergraduate internships and like sort of like summer research activities. So I'd say apply for those. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like sort of just have to like throw yourself in, and see. Research is, it's not necessarily like, it's sort of daunting at first, but like, looking back on it, I understand that like the people who I started working with at the very beginning understood that I was a newcomer, right? So I didn't know too much. And so like throwing yourself in sometimes is really difficult, but it also can really pay off. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, awesome. And we're going to finish up because I got to go to bed at some point. It's early for you still. But
yeah, it's only 7:15.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Next week, I got another Chris. All right, it's going to be Chris King, and he does some molecular with crystallization photography. So he does art. So we're going to look at the convalescence, the combining of art and science together. So a different tack versus just straight up research and everything. So that's going to be a really good chat next week. Thank you, Mr. Hamill, for the follow. I appreciate that. We are going to do a raid, and I believe Rocket Sage is still streaming, and we will go annoy her a little bit. So please hang out, and we'll go with her. She's playing Valheim tonight. But she's another geology streamer, so we'll be there. So, woo. Thanks for the gifted sub, Mr. Hamill. Appreciate that. Great, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here and all your support. And it's been great. It's been so much fun. I hope you had a good time too, Chris. And we'll be in touch. Wonderful. And especially Lauren, thank you for all your support. She's amazing. So let me get this raid set up so we can go see Rocket say she raided me last week, so I can raid her this week. So everyone please hang out, and then when you get there, all right, say hello. All right, hang out. And such a good time. I learned so much tonight, as always. All right, everybody.
I hope I did.
Later.
That was my plan. Science streams. Hey, thank you very much for the raid, man.
All right, there we go.
I'm gonna punch him to death. I don't care.